that we have these patients who may be chronically self-loathing, and some of that may come from the environment, or some of that may come from a home where they didn't fit into, they didn't match well, an invalidating environment. But much of it may also come from a genetic predisposition. So look at the things, the rigidity, the inflexibility, the way the brain can't shift gears, the way the brain can't change, the way things that are new are dystonic and frightening. The criticalness, looking at something critically, to think that just doesn't come because your mother was critical or your father was critical, but because there's a component in your DNA that actually marks for that. So look at some of these things that are there that you would consider personality traits that are genetically predisposed. And the one that I like to talk about, two things that I like to talk about most now because they're so relevant in eating disorders, is comparison. Our patients with eating disorders are more genetically predisposed to compare. Some people, what you're doing, I don't really care what you're doing. But some people like, what are you doing? What are you saying? What are you thinking about me? How does what I'm doing, how do you think about what I'm doing? So because my brain is genetically predisposed to function in comparison, that makes me more vulnerable to developing an eating disorder. The other thing that is there, which those of us that treat eating disorders know, is what I call self-adamancy. If anybody has a better word for this, I'm happy to take it on. But that is the idea that I can do this myself. Like, I need to do this myself. Now, of course, part of this comes from the environment that you grow up in and the abuses that you may have had. But there's another we know now that there's a genetic predisposition. There's also a genetic predisposition to think in numbers. And so what could be more relevant to our clients with eating disorders? How much they weigh, how much other people weigh, what grade they got on the test, how that all compares to do what? What do they do with that? How does that make me feel about myself? Am I more or less than? So words that you'll hear if you look back at that continuum, which when we didn't know all this was, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I important enough? So all of those are the traits, but look on the other side. Look at the physiologically genetically predisposed things that would make one vulnerable to developing the eating disorder, particularly what we now are looking at in binge eating disorder, and you'll hear a lot more about this, is hunger detection has a genetic predisposition. Not everybody can taste and smell the same way, so they're genetically going to be predisposed to have different sensory factors. We're going to talk a little bit more about ARFID today. So people can taste things or smell things differently to the point where they're aversive and they don't want to eat it. It's not an eating disorder where they're looking at how much do I weigh and what my body looks like. It's like, I don't want to eat that because it smells, or I don't want to eat that because it looks like ants crawling on the table. So we'll talk more about that. But all of these physiological components of the body, absorption, detection, elimination, have an impact on the development of an eating disorder. The amount of bloat that I get when I eat something, or my motility, has an impact on how my stomach feels, which in a world where little children are going, I hate my stomach, that's traumatizing. So all of those are physical and behavioral traits that we now know are predisposed, and we don't know all of them yet. So if you think of the combination of things that go into the development of an eating disorder, it makes it pretty complex, both to determine and also to treat.
Sondra, what about the difference between men and women? Because you're talking about asking for help. I could do it on my own.
Enormous difference. Well, not only is there a difference between the asking, there is a difference between the way men show up for treatment. I mean, men show up for treatment for other reasons, and then you find out that they have an eating disorder. But the value for women has changed. Women's bodies have always been valued for what they look like, and sort of like the beauty of it. And men have historically been valued for how much money they make, how much power they have. But that's really changing because of the media, because of the pictures of cutout men. So the men have more eating disorders because when they look at those pictures as little kids, they don't match up. They don't feel good about themselves. So remember, we're back on that line of I don't feel good about myself that we used 30 years ago, but we now have much more power to it, and we know why it's happening. So We're moving in, what happened? What was that movie? Where was I? Oh, okay, thank you. Not like I'm following this anyway, but okay. So these are the messages that we're getting in the media, both men and women. And so the development of eating disorders for men is catching up very quickly to the development of eating disorders for women. The difference is that it's much more difficult for men in this culture to show up for treatment. Historically, this is a female disease, right? So and the irony of it is we've had great boys and men in our program, and it's such a cohesive. The issues are the same, but getting there is different. Okay, these are some of the messages. Okay, Dana, thank you very much. Okay, so what does technology actually do? It gives us more external. So what we're trying to do with people is to help them get comfortable with who they are, to begin to either like or accept who they are. That's what the treatment is about. And constantly looking at pictures of other people. Or wait, here's another comparison. Not pictures of other people, but what about the clients and patients that are now 28, but keep looking at when they were 15. But when I was 15, so they're not just comparing themselves, their brain is not just working on other people, it's working on them in the past. So they're always saying, or they'll say, but that never happened to me before. I'm like, okay, but life is different. It changes every day. So the idea that change occurs is very frightening to them for lots of different reasons, emotionally and physically. So there's lots of external measuring. There's lots of more comparison by photo. And what are they comparing themselves to, right? What about all the photoshopping? So, not only, we used to look at the magazines, say, the magazines are photoshopped. But now, even if I can do it, anybody can do it, right? If I can change what a picture looks like, there's even apps where you can change what you look like. So the comparison is fraudulent. What about all the bullying that goes on online? What about people saying whatever they want? Eat this and you'll lose weight, or, you're too this, or you're too... There's like a million voices. You have like a million friends when you used to have 5. And the 5 cared about you a little bit. Online, you could say whatever you want. A little bit they cared about you, until they all turned against you. But okay. So there's more exposure, there's more constant criticism, there's more comparison, there's more judgment. How does that all feel to somebody who doesn't feel good about themselves? Right. It's just monumental, critical, I'm not okay. So that's what it comes out of it. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm just, look, I could talk forever. Everybody who knows me knows that I could talk forever. My old business partner is going, all right, there she goes.